All right, so let's go to the second part. We're going to do calculations or report with some calculations. So let's go and do this. I'm going to run, excuse me, SSRS, the reporting services as an administrator. So Visual Studio. If you are using Visual Studio 2019, that's fine, same thing. So I'm going to run this as an administrator. In the code, I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to search for reporting. I'm not going to use the wizard. I'm going to use I'm going to do step by step. So the reporting service project, I'm going to call this report with calculations part 2. Okay. You can call it, whatever. The other can be basic. This can be advanced. The name is not important. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a project. Yes, and we're going to call this calculation report. So I'm going to here that you can hear well. I'm going to add new item report, and this is report you can find a better naming for your report, or depending customer calculation report or sales calculation report. This is just for example. So if you open here, you can see the reporting. So now to do this report, to add calculations, we're going to use a share data source. All right, so we are creating the report, but we are going to use the shared data source. So before we use the data source here in the left, now we're going to use the shared data source here in the right. So after the report, we're going to use the shared data source. And we're going to select add, what else we have? Existing, no. Add new data source. So here we're going to call this, let's see, I'm looking at naming DW. Yes, make sure that here you not have an analysis or anything, is SQL Server. And we're going to build that connection. And remember that we have to add that connection string that I think I have. I don't, oh my God, no. Dude, I know, I close it. Anyway, copy this. I'm gonna have to. Okay, so here, and now we're going to connect to the Advantage Work DW because we are using this sample database. Here I'm going to put the server. You can use this drop down arrow to find your server. I just copy and paste mine. And here I'm going to select Adventure Works DW. For example, if you're doing a course project and you have created your SSIS and you have data warehouse, you select that. And we're going to say, before we even tested the connection, is test. Okay. So here is my connection. However, you can see that doesn't have, let me see. I know that I had the, give me a second. I need to look for update, create a report. Let me get the connection string here. I'm going to post this in a lecture, so I had to copy this part. So it is in the handout, but I am going to put in the the new handout for the second project. So semicolon, and then I'm putting encrypted false and trust certificate true. and I'm going to go to my credentials and make sure the use Windows authentication is selected. However, it might not hold it, so you have to go back and add it. So, okay. So if you go here to your shared data source, you can see that you have your data source in there. Okay, so we did it. And now we're going to add a new data source. So we added a shared data source. This is the DW. Now we're going to add another data source here. So we're going to add a data source. So before I move, here is the shared data source. So we're going to use this shared data source, and then we're going to add a new data source in the left. Add data source. We're going to call this ADW. I think it's the same as before. And in the bottom it says use shared data source. Instead of connecting with the server like we just did, we're going to use a data source, a shared data source. So here is the name of the data source here that I just created in the right. Here it is. And we're going to click OK. So before is already Windows is selected. Perfect. OK. I always like to kind of check. And then we're going to add a data set. So here we're going to add the tables that we want in our report. So add data set. And we are going to call this GPR. And here use data set embedded in this report. And here we have this. Yeah. We're going to open the design query. And it's not working because cancel here. I'm going to go here to look at the credentials. It is the credentials is done. Let me see. Okay. 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 So let's go again. So this is, let me see, data source properties, credentials. It is authenticated, and I'm gonna go here to my credentials here, and okay, let me go again. So it didn't work adding my data set. So I'm kind of going back and say, well, if it didn't work, let me check the properties. Credentials is using Windows credential. However, I connected this to the shared data source. So I'm gonna go here in my properties. No, actually here. And the credential, I double click the credentials. And actually my Windows authentication is not selected. So now we're good. Okay. And now I'm ready to add it because I have both Windows authentication in the shared data source and in the data source. I'm going to add the tables now. So here we're going to call this GPR. We're going to use the ADW, the data source. I'm going to open the query. And now I was able to connect it because I double check the Windows authentication from both um, shared data source and from the data source. All right, so please do not confuse shared data source with the data source. Okay, so we need to add the same tables as we had before. And that was the in customer. I believe it was the in customer. Yes. And then fact internet sale. So we have these two tables here. I'm just gonna make them. So for the customer, it was, I think, a gender. No, first name, last name. So we need first name and last name. And from the internet sales, we need total product cost, total product cost, and sales amount. Perfect. Not aggregated functions, nothing. And okay, so we just have these two. And okay, and here we have four data sets. And now we need to add a table here. To add a table, we need the toolbox. If you don't have, I have the toolbox available here because I already added before. So go to view and then click in the toolbox. All right, I'm not going to do that because I already have it here. I'm clicking and then I'm grabbing the table all the way to this rectangle. So I have three and I'm going to start by adding first name. So I'm going to grab first name and drop in the first column here. Then last name and then total product cost, and then sales amount. Another column and ah, okay. So I have that too. We're going to add a calculation, but before that, let me preview. And you see that I have the first name, the total product cost, and can you change? No, I guess I want to make it bigger. Okay, so let's go to the design. That's it. Now we need to add a expression. All right. So here it is the calculation like we did it before, but now we're going to add the expression in the next video.